We are excited. I'm excited that you are here with us today. My name is Greg Ligon, and I am the president of the Ligon Group. And we have a small consulting practice where we work with churches and also authors. My wife and I do some work in publishing as well, but our primary work is through coaching and consulting with large churches and senior teams. There are a couple of inflection points from the last several years that led to the selection of today's topic. The first was a trip that I hosted back just before COVID to Marriott Corporate. And we had some of the leading multi-site kind of pioneering churches with us. Larry Osborne, who'll be joining us in a little bit, was with us. And Jeff Kahler, I think you were there from LCBC. Jeff Beachum, I think you may have even been at that meeting. But one of the big aha experiences in our learnings at Marriott was how they had effectively taken 29 different independent brands under the umbrella of Marriott brand and really created a family of brands, or if you would, a family of hotels. I'm going to be introducing you to in a little bit to Bruce Smith from College Park in Indianapolis, and he's going to be sharing a little bit about their model of a family of churches that has some very similar kinds of structures and some similar kinds of understandings to how Marriott did their work as well. The second was what was happening during the early stages of the pandemic. If you can remember back there, it's been so fun to see people posting pictures with no mask on airplanes. But if you can remember back there, we moved from this kind of shutting everything down for the specific 2 weeks to flatten the curve that actually turned into many months of reimagining ministry. And there were all kinds of church leader conversations that were beginning to turn from survival to what's next. There was a great deal of analysis that was happening throughout the church, but one of the streams that was particularly interesting to me was the conversation that was held by pioneers in the movement. And they were saying that they felt like the new wave of innovation in multi-site was actually not so much new as it was being accelerated by the pandemic. And then in the early days too, as data folks like Barna and Stetzer began to predict that potential for losing as many as 20% of the churches in the U.S. Was a possibility, not a new idea, but a kind of newly energized idea for adding campuses via merger began to come back on the scene again. Today, you're going to have an opportunity to hear from Jeff Kahler from Lives Changed by Christ, and their expanding multiplication strategy that includes mergers. And he'll share a little bit about their most recent one that involved actually adding a church with 4 campuses. These are just a couple of the inflection points that lead us to ask the question, so what does multi-site look like now, and what's it going to look like next? It's a great question, and we're going to deal with some of the specific applications of multi-site strategy I've just said, but you're also going to be hearing from Larry Osborne and the insights that he has regarding what's next for the church in terms of multi-site. Larry, as many of you know, is one of the early pioneers. I love him. He's got an insatiable, innovative, pioneering spirit. And loves to share about what God's doing in their context and has great insight for us today as well. So you're in for a treat and a ride. We're going to have a great 90 minutes. You're going to be challenged. You're going to be inspired, encouraged. And our prayer here at Ligon Group is that when you log off, that you'll be taking with you at least one tangible action that will help you to move towards what's next for your church. So this is how we're going to work together this morning. First, we'll have a series of presentations and some Q&A with Bruce and Larry and Jeff Beachum. As I already mentioned, for those who weren't on the call, Jeff is with Portable Church, and he is the sponsor. Portable Church is the sponsor for this accelerator. And as they speak, again, a reminder, post your questions in the chat, and Daniel will be reviewing those for our Q&A time. You've already asked actually some really good questions for those of you who included a question in your registration. We hope to get to many of them today, but we've also made a commitment post the event that we're going to be putting together a multi-site next wave FAQ where we'll answer some more of those questions, and we'll be sending that to you in the weeks ahead. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our guest. First, Jeff Kahler. Jeff serves as the LCBC Strategic Leadership Team, serves on the leadership team as the Director of Expansion and Advancement. Jeff's previous work history includes public accounting, private equity, a partner in a commercial printing company, and humanitarian work with orphans in Kenya. So, Jeff, I want to welcome you, and we'd love to hear your story from LCBC and the story about mergers. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Greg, and appreciate the influence and wisdom and discernment you've had on our church in years past. And I've been on staff for about 6 years at LCBC, but I know there's lots of stories and lots of conversations that you've been a part of as far as our growth as well. So just want to thank you up front for that as well. But yeah, I have a few notes here I thought I'd share with you guys today as far as what we're thinking on as far as mergers. I thought I'd start though with a little bit of context. Again, Greg mentioned I get to lead our expansion team and advancement team here at LCBC, and also serve on our strategic leadership team, which rolls up to David Ashcraft, our senior pastor. And the expansion team was really a vision of David and our elder board about 3 or 4 years ago. We've got about 265 right now on staff. And one of the things we were running into is just kind of the day-to-day, week-to-week ministry side of things. And as we think about kind of new locations or mergers or things of that nature, real estate acquisitions, where are we going next, that if we could just take a team and kind of carve them out to think on that, wake up every day thinking about that instead of in the mix of day-to-day and week-to-week ministry. And so there's about 12 of us that got carved out and have been doing that for the last few years. It just allows us to be super focused on where we're going next, how are we going there, where, all that fun stuff. But just to tell you a little bit more about LCBC Church, Lives Changed by Christ Church, if you're not familiar, we've got 19 locations currently, all in the state of PA. 16 of those are what we call campus locations, so kind of full-blown bricks and mortar locations. And we've got 3 locations that are what we call community gatherings, smaller versions or smaller expressions of our full-blown campus locations as well. And we're looking to do more. So in addition to those community gatherings and physical campus locations, we've also started a home gathering strategy this year. Different names for that, home churches, things of that nature. But the idea of how can we go further faster as we reach the state of Pennsylvania and beyond. So that's been fun. So that would roll up to our team as well. In addition to that, our team would also be responsible for what we call church relationships. So working with and adding value to other churches, really with a focus kind of on the PA, regional, Northeast, but really we have churches that are involved from all over the country. We do a once a year event. We do some roundtables. We've got a monthly newsletter we send out type thing, but really just a board edict to add value to other churches and do a weekend. Greg mentioned that really came out of the time we had at Marriott. And I think it's like 30 different brands or whatever it was at that time that as we reach the state of Pennsylvania and beyond, it doesn't need to be our flag or our banner. How else can we help other people in other churches? So kind of came up to that, and that rolls up to our team as well. We've currently got about 20,000 on a weekend across all those locations that are engaged. We've got small locations that are about 100 people, and we've got large locations which are in the thousands each weekend. But yeah, basically our location strategy going forward, Greg mentioned mergers. In that location strategy, I mentioned our home and community gatherings and of course campus locations. We've gotten fairly good. We've been blessed to launch a number of locations over the years and do that in a traditional way. But of our 19 locations, 7 of them have come through merger opportunities. So not quite half, but obviously a good portion of our locations have come through that. So I thought I'd just back up a little bit, maybe give you a quick history on some of those mergers, how they came to be. But our first one was actually back in 2012, 2013, was a church down in the Philadelphia area. And really our footprint in the state of PA right now is we'd go as far east as kind of that Western Philadelphia area, if you're familiar with that, as far north as the Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area. We're centrally located in the Lancaster County part of the state. A lot of locations in the Lancaster County, Harrisburg, but we would go as far west as Waynesboro, which is really close to the Gettysburg area, again, if you're familiar with the state at all. But back in 2012, 2013, we were approached by a large church, about 1,000 people at that time. That was our first venture into a merger or opportunity. We really cut our teeth with that opportunity. We did some things really well. We did some things not so well, but it was a great learning opportunity. And then about a year or so later, we had another opportunity with another rather large church, about 1,000 people attending at that time, and went through that merger, learned a little more, went a little better. That's one of the things I guess I would emphasize with our history is we want to continually learn. And if you've been through one yet, or you're thinking about one, just have that open mind of not only do you want it to go well, but what can we learn through this process. 2015-16 merged with another church that really their senior pastor had just kind of left. So that was an interesting opportunity, about 400 people. And then again in 2015, which really took a couple years, a smaller location, but was a church plant, and took a little longer to kind of vet that one out. But a small location, only about 100 people, but now it's about a 300, on the weekend currently, and it's turned into a really nice location to us. Learned a lot through that as well. And then the one I just wanted to focus a little bit on today that Greg had mentioned is we just recently went through a merger here over the last few years, and I'll get into that a little bit here. But 3 locations in the Scranton Wilkes-Barre area, Parker Hill Church, if you're familiar with that church at all. And wow, just a great opportunity. It's probably the best one we've done so far. But just maybe want to share some of the reasons and lessons learned from that here, just kind of go through that. Before I get into that, just backing up a little bit, we're very much a fan of, some of you have heard of the book Better Together. But we follow those 25 questions in that book. That's one of our guiding templates, our guiding filters. We've developed some of our own templates, some of our own processes that we go through. But that really has been the backbone for us as far as a starting point. The Parker Hill Church, 3 locations. We started the conversation in 2019, to give you an idea. Early 2019, they approached us, and we had a relationship with them for the last, 15, 20 years through some of the things I mentioned earlier, as far as an annual event we do called All Access, where we just have churches come in for the day and give them all access, just to come in, ask us questions, have different breakouts. And really through that, and just getting to know their team over the last 10 or 15 years, gave them the opportunity to just start that conversation with David, our senior pastor. Things went well, the conversations went well. And then, as you can imagine, we were in that stereotypical about to go public with the merger in March of 2020. And we all know what happened then. And we just kind of froze everything literally a week or two before we were supposed to go public with COVID, and just paused and just took about, I guess it was about 6 months or so, to just really see where COVID was going and what that meant going forward. But long story short, picked up conversations again, started to get real comfortable with things. That all led to a going public with it in late 2020 and into 2021, which we had both churches voted in summer of 2021. And then it was a positive vote. The Parker Hill side was a 98.7% partner approval, and we had about a 99% approval on our side. And then we executed the merger last fall into this year type thing. Some learnings, just real quick. Timing. Obviously, COVID threw some loops in there, but one of the things we did this time was we did what we ended up calling a strategic partnership. So if you're familiar with church mergers, or you've been through one, kind of the school of thought, if you will, is kind of rip the Band-Aid off, pick that date and merge and move forward. Actually, because of just what COVID was throwing at us in that season, we decided to do a 6-month strategic partnership before we actually made it legal and voted and merged. And that was different. And we had some apprehension about that. But looking back, it really gave mostly Parker Hill the opportunity and their people to get to know us, kind of date a little, so to speak, and really affirmed both sides. I think it's one of the reasons we ended up with a very high percentage on both sides, was just as we got to know each other, have some fun with that, do a lot of meet and greets, things in the background. It actually led to a very high approval, the highest one I think we've had as far as mergers. Both churches are very similar in a lot of ways. So again, just knowing each other, being a couple hours away from each other over the years, influencing each other over the years led to that. But we definitely took notice of that because we've had a merger or two where we were similar, but maybe not as similar, and those did not go as well, type thing. I mentioned the public phase and just doing the strategic partnership. Just a quick note to we are in the middle of a campaign, actually a capital campaign, and Parker Hill had just come out of one recently, so we didn't really know. We just merged. Now we're going to go through a campaign and ask people for money, and that's continued to go really well and allow a lot of conversations around reinstilling vision and kind of where we want to go in the future. One of the other big learnings was staff. We approached this one a little different this time. We had the opportunity. They had a very strong internal, what they call their directional leadership team. So not only their senior pastor, but they had a couple of very strong executive, part of their exec team, the directional leadership team, that allowed us to have somebody kind of on the other side, in addition to the senior pastor, to work on and work with and really dig into the staff side more than we ever had in the past. They had about 24 staff, I think was the actual number, that we ended up transitioning over. And basically we had about 100%. I think there were only one or two that chose to, hey, this is a great time, nothing against LCBC, but I'm going to go a different way. Or one of them went to work for a local university. So nothing bad, no ill will, but we had a very strong staff transition rate through this merger. But because we spent a lot of time there on both sides, so that was a big learning this time around as well. Trying to think what else. One of the other things I think we learned was to not only think about it as a merger and joining us, but also helping the people of that church that we were merging with about our continued vision for the state and where we were going and how we truly could be better together and reach that region better together versus just kind of on their own or them needing to look at other options type thing. So really leaning into the vision probably more than we ever have going forward, not only for LCBC, but just personalizing it for those people in that region, in that part of the state type thing. So yeah, I think that sums it up from a recent merger standpoint. I think the other thing I would just add here, and I know Greg's going to open up for some Q&A, so I'm just rapid firing with you guys. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions that come in. One is, several of the ones you've mentioned in terms of the mergers are ones that says you gave several examples of churches approaching them first. Were there any instances when LCBC kind of initiated the merger?
No, we didn't have any of that. They've all approached us with initial conversations. That is something we've been thinking on now, kind of this moving forward chapter or season. Of course, we don't want to come across the wrong way or in a bad way. The mega church is trying to take everybody over. We've heard some of that. We get that. But all the ones we've had so far are people approaching us. But we are starting to see that change a little bit from some people we've talked to where maybe a church has closed down and we didn't hear about it till after the fact. And you get in these conversations of, wow, I wish I would have known you guys would have been open to coming to this part of the state because we would have loved to have a conversation, but now it's kind of too late. So we've been thinking on that from how do we be proactive in the space, knowing that there's a certain level of taboo there with it, but can we do that in a God-honoring way? And we think we can, but we're still thinking on that. So I'd love to chew on that with anybody in the future or offline.
It's a great question. I mentioned on the front end that we're going to do some kind of a FAQ. I'll include in that a couple of examples that I know of churches that have had a little bit more proactive model. One more question. This is from Ben Stapley. What was your campus launch rate or goal pre-COVID? How frequently did you launch? And has that changed, increased or decreased post-COVID?
Yeah, great question. We've generally stayed away. Sometimes we do from strategic planning, we find ourselves in this like, let's launch 2 a year, or let's come up with some sort of, we've really resisted that as best we can from we have some goals. We're working on a 3-year strategic plan now, but have really resisted that from wanting to make sure we're just 100% in tune with where God wants us to go, when he wants us to go there, and just really making sure we have a balance there. But we didn't have any specific goal, but we were probably averaging about 1 or 2 a year through that stretch there that I mentioned. We had a lot of growth very, very quickly over that 5-10 year stretch there.
Very good. Thanks, Jeff. We're going to switch gears now, and I'm going to invite Jeff Beachum to join us, and we're going to get his presentation here real quick. We're going to do a couple of questions with Jeff. While I'm getting this, Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and pose the first question. In the next wave of multi-site activity in the church, how are you seeing churches leverage portable environments? And what do you see with reference to any change with regard to that in the future? You may be muted.
There you go. There we go. So some of the changes that I see happening, first of all, Portable Church has been around for 27 years, and there have been a lot of what are great churches now that were early adopters. LCBC is one of those, Life Church, North Point, Saddleback, Summit. I could go on forever. But the early adopters still have portability as a part of their strategy. What I'm finding now are some innovations. The benefits of portability are always going to be there, but some innovations in the model. When they have portability as one of their tools, they seem to be able to miss the thing that they're trying to get over. I have a lot of churches that have connected with me and with PCI and have asked, so we are multi-siting, we're doing well. The problem is I can't raise enough money fast enough. And I heard Jeff earlier on with LCBC talking about we need to figure out how to go faster, better. And we believe that Portable Church is helping churches to do that. And we're seeing some new strategies coming into play.
That's awesome. What are some of the features of a portable environment that allow a church to gain and sustain their multi-site momentum?
Actually, that's the slide.
Yeah.
And I've got a handout that on the next slide, you'll be able to use a QR code and download some of these, but just go ahead and rip those off. I'm not going to go into all of them, but some of the basics are the first ones. With portability, churches got to love low capital investment. Of the other 5 ways a church can land in a new community, portability is probably the least expensive, and we can help you do it really well. Low operations expense from week to week with just rental after you've purchased the basic system, the rentals in the schools. There's a quick entry into the community and into a facility. You can get into a new community within months and easily be flexible within a particular facility that you find. And so that's really helpful. Also, the momentum piece is early exponential growth. And that's growth of people. When you can go into a community in a portable setting and gain momentum by increasing the number of people that you have, as well as perhaps the tithes and offerings or capital that you might be trying to raise in that community for your next project, which usually is going to be a permanent facility, and we know that. A couple of the more soft advantages are the last 2, a soft failure versus a permanent failure. We've had a number of churches that have gone into communities and it wasn't what they expected, and they had to fail at that launch. But it's a whole lot easier to fail at a portable campus than it is at a permanent campus when so much money and time and leadership capital has been at stake. And the last one is probably not as well known, but most people find that if they go into a community in a portable setting, they become an insider. and they can then navigate through the community and find perhaps the next site, perhaps find hone in their ministry a little bit better. There are a lot of advantages to being on the inside of a community in a portable setting than just bearing the expense of going in there full bore.
Good. That's good. I love the kind of the quick entry and launch. I know that you've worked with, I believe, Christ Fellowship down in Palm Beach Gardens some, and that one of the things that they have been using portability around is this pop-up campus idea. So they have a campus that's actually always going to be portable. And so every week they're already loading that stuff in and loading it out. And so one of the things they're doing is they're taking that portable solution into other communities where they think they might want to have a campus at some point in time, doing a short-term lease and kind of testing the waters, if you would, see if there's an affinity to the work that the kind of ministry that they're doing. So lots of really great opportunities for portability. Questions that you have, I'd love to hear any questions you might have for Jeff around portability, things that have worked, or questions that you have about maybe something that you're trying to figure out. Any questions we have on that?
While the questions are coming in, I would like to share a couple of the strategies that I see popping up now.
Yeah, please do.
So churches like College Park, and you're going to hear from Bruce in a minute, they have launched their family of churches as some have been portable, and they are a family of ministries in that portable environment, and they eventually going as an autonomous church themselves. Churches like the District Church in Washington, D.C. are trying to figure out how not to have so much money tied up in a 24/7 large room experience. And so they have done ministry 24/7 in another facility and have their worship experience in a high school and have upped their game there. And then churches like Liberty Live, LCBC, Southeast Christian, Christ Church of the Valley have all come to the understanding that they would love to continue growing, but they can't afford to keep doing it in the kind of facilities that they're used to. And so they've adopted portability and have found that it's a wonderful way to gain entrance into a community and have a longer planning ramp into that community with a more permanent facility.
Hey, Jeff, got a question coming in. What's the average life cycle of portable before permanent?
Boy, we have had churches, unfortunately, have just done it for a year because they already had plans to go permanent. And what they discovered, and I can outline some of this individually if you'd like, but they discovered that that was too short and it didn't tell them how successful they were going to be in the community. And they misbuilt their building. So I wouldn't recommend real short stay unless you are committed to something already in that community. And we've had churches, we've had a church down in Phoenix. It's been 18 years. And I ran into the pastor a couple of months ago, and he said, man, it came out of nowhere, but we had no plans to get out of portability. And now we had a building become available. It came and emerged, and now we're out of portability, but that portable experience was a great thing for us. So
we got one more question. As I ask the question, I just want to know, you should see up on the screen a QR code. And if you click that QR code, it will allow you to download all these resources from Portable Church here. We're also going to be sending a document, another document on launching 4 or more. Or moving beyond 4, I think is the title of that, Jeff,
Yep.
that we'll send with in the follow-up email, so you have that resource as well. One last question here. Do you have any data on the effectiveness of portability in upper middle class suburban areas versus more permanent solutions? Our concern is the consumer mentality seeks higher quality amidst lots of other options.
Warren Bird has done some study for us, and he would probably have some data on that specifically, but we're not finding that particular communities are having a hard time accepting portability. I think it's the opportunity. Some of the recent experiences with Southeast Christian, Christ Church of the Valley, they're going into some very nice neighborhoods and into some nice schools and nice YMCAs, and finding that church is acceptable there as it is anywhere. It's really doesn't have anything to do with communities that are well off or not well off accepting portability. The way we do portable church, it's done very well and accepted by most everybody.
Yeah, we'll get some, there is some research that Warren's done, and we'll pull some of that and include that in the FAQ document we're sending out afterwards as well. Thank you very much, Jeff. Great stuff. There's lots of options in terms of using portability. It's not just about adding a campus. We didn't get a chance to talk about this much today, but you'll want to follow up with Jeff. I know that during COVID, they came up with some really creative solutions for creating portable environments that could be used inside, outside, and as a part of your permanent structure even. So don't think about this just as, setting up shop in a theater. Think about this as an avenue to really accelerate your work throughout the church, whether it's a campus or not. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, we're going to shift gears and we're going to go to Bruce Smith. And Bruce, welcome. Bruce is at College Park Church in Indianapolis, and they have a model that they call a family of churches. And I'm just going to turn it to him and have him share a little bit about that. And then we'll take some Q&A from him as well. Again, just a reminder to drop your questions into the Q&A. And if you aren't muted, please do so.
It's good to be with you this morning. Thanks, Greg and Jeff, for the invitation. And just so glad to be with the folks on the call here. As Greg mentioned, I've been asked to speak about a local family of churches that has developed over the last number of years through a church planting initiative of College Park. Our partnering is with other churches that have a similar DNA, but are locally self-governed. So we're not one entity, we're independent, but we effectively serve our neighbors through church planting together. So our focus is local, sustainable church planting within the family. And how it started is about 9 years ago, College Park was finishing up an expansion project that we were undertaking in the Lord's way. He brought the elders together to start considering what was next for College Park. And College Park's been involved in urban work, traditional church planting, and global unreached people groups. And in the College Park way of trying things, the elders decided to investigate two ideas. One was a church leadership residency, and the second was to plant a campus in a neighborhood that a number of people are coming from. And the campus went really well. It was portable in the school, and it grew to several hundred people within that first year. And in the second year, our lead pastor and the campus pastor were discussing what messages they would be bringing. And the campus pastor said, well, I think our campus needs a certain topic. And our lead pastor was thinking something different. And so that brought us to a point of decision was, are we going to be identical, or how do we work through this difference? And College Park is kind of a larger church that always had beginnings in smaller churches. And in our instincts and some conversations with some of our friends around the country, we thought that ultimately the campus someday would become a local self-governed church. And so rather than just thinking about that, we started to develop some processes to intentionally move in that direction. And so because of that, when we adjusted our thinking to want to become a self-governed, financially autonomous church, but still stay connected as, if you will, adult children to serve the community together. So that's what we changed our processes to. And the first campus went through that to become a locally self-governed church. And that was the start of the family. Since then, in the last 6 years, we've done 3 other church plants in that methodology, where The church starts with a lot of support. It moves to biblically self-governed with membership, eldership, and then finally becomes financially autonomous. And then we pool our resources to help start the next church. So church planting can be bumpy if you've done that before, but we found that defining ahead of time that our ultimate goal is healthy, self-governed churches working together to plant other churches clarifies a lot of things. So far, in our 4 church plants have gone through that, it's taken us about 1 year to get to a point where they're biblically self-governed, and then another 2 years or so to be financially autonomous. And our hope is the next church plant that we do together will be led by one of the church plants. So there's lots of things that can be kind of tricky with this. Our primary connection is the relationship between leaders. We do have some operating agreements that we have set up, but by far the primary connection is the relationship that we maintain with our leadership. So about every quarter we're together formally, and more frequently on an informal basis. There's things that we're always working through together, but this common mission of church planting and a high respect for one another allows us to do that without having a sense of uniformity. So that's what the Lord's brought for College Park. I think it could be something that churches of different sizes could consider, because it's local, it's sustainable, it's scalable, and so that's how the Lord's been working here.
Awesome. Thanks, Bruce. Questions for Bruce. We got one. Was the first College Park Family Church already self-sustaining financially? And is there any dollar flow between the churches in the family of churches?
Yeah, great question. So the first church, as most church plants go, they need help at the start. And that's where the family model comes in. You think of a new church plant, you have a family around, so there is financial commitments that we make to one another. And then over time, there's also processes and kind of the operational things that we bring to the church plant so that they can go through the season of growth, stability, developing clarity in their mission, and then financial independence. So we do help one another. Every one of the church plants, we received a phone call sometime saying, we're not going to make it. And so we'd walk through, okay, so how are we going to get there? And we are able to help one another through those tough times.
Well, sticking with your metaphor, did you have any of them move back in?
We have not, gratefully. So
that's good. Another question here. Can you define leadership? You said staff, lay leaders that have the agreement. You said the leaders have an agreement. Who's involved with that?
Yeah, we are a congregational type polity. So we have lay elders that care for one another between the churches, but the primary connections are the lead pastors of the churches.
Very good. You also mentioned at the front end of your presentation that you all had a leadership residency.
Correct.
Could you say just a couple sentences more about that?
Yeah. So we saw an opportunity to be a kind of a care center and a way to prepare the next generation of leaders for church ministry. And so we piloted it with a couple individuals. We have a 1 year and a 2 year residency that's available that people apply to, and give them a broad cross-section of leadership experiences in areas that they're interested in, everything from leader, preaching, counseling, women's ministry, worship arts, and we've grown that to 6 positions now that we have in our residency.
To you, Larry Osborne. Larry's a good friend. I got to know him years and years ago through Leadership Network and through some of the early multi-site work that we were a part of. He's a pastor, he's an author, he's a mentor, he's a leadership consultant, and he's trained and coached thousands of leaders, not only in the church, but also in for-profit sectors as well. You probably recognize his name from some of his pioneering work with concepts like sermon-based small groups, pastoral teaching teams. He was one of the first folks that did pastoral teaching teams. Of course, video venues. I call him the grandfather of video venues and multi-site churches. His fingerprints are really found in ministries and churches across the country and really around the world. So I'm excited to have an opportunity for you to hear from Larry about some of the things that he's learning and seeing his work at North Coast as well as other churches around the country. So welcome, Larry. I really appreciate your being here with us. And just a reminder to folks, add your questions to the Q&A, and we'll get to a Q&A session here in just a little bit.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I was asked to talk about, what's next and what's it going to take to move forward in multi-site. And that's a little bit of a daunting task in the sense that there are so many options. That's like, how do you plant a great restaurant or a 4-star Michelin or whatever it would be, and you get 20 of the chefs from those places and you get 30 different answers. But what I'm going to try to do is from 30,000 feet, the things I've been experiencing at times. Part of my giftedness has been to see mentally model things in the sense of seeing unintended consequences. So that's where I'm going to go. Basically, some of what I think is the unchangeable present, because nobody can predict the future. But I love the story of Peter Drucker, 20, 30 years before it happened, predicting the failure of the European social safety net and immigration issues. And people, how did he do it? He didn't see the future. He saw the unchangeable present, which was 0 birth rates. And if you have 0 birth rates now, it's kind of clear, if you stop and think about it, where things are going to be in the future. And those were 2 of the things he saw. So let me just kind of ramble on a series of things. I didn't want to do slides because I wanted to be as fresh as I could with this. So, but the first thing is this, is I think we're going to, moving forward successfully, we're going to need to clarify our definitions. And some of us have already done that very well. But we live in a world where people use the same words, but different dictionaries. You certainly find that in our culture and politics these days, but it's always been true in churches as well. I used to ask a Baptist church, how big is your church? And I get one number. And then I had to follow up with another question, how many people show up? If I'd ask a Lutheran church, they'd tell me how many adults were in worship. Then I'd have to ask how many kids. I'd ask a new non-denominational plant, and I'd just have to, drop 20%, and I'd get my number. But everybody's really being honest within their framework. It's just kind of how it works. So let me talk about multi-site, something that for a long time has been an issue with me. And that is, there are 2 kinds of what we call multi-site. The first is multi-congregational, and the second is truly multi-site. So even multi-campus might be a better overarching word. And I think at the beginning of this movement, we got so excited, those of us who are a part of it, to see this thing exploding, that we led to some confusion. And both of them are great models. The multi-congregational model has been around since the beginning. It's a great church, and somebody else wants another church like that. And the mark of a multi-congregational church is live teaching. And in about 85 to 90%, we're both the same. Multi-site, by the way, would be a primarily video teaching church. So much is the same, but a couple things are different as you think about them going in the future. Multi-congregational churches are simply long gestation church plants. Every church movement started as that, a great church, and then somebody else wanted it. And as they got larger and larger today, we call them denominations. And like I said, I am all for that as a model. I think it is the only model to do, especially when you have somebody who's a teaching leader. Lead pastors tend to fall into 2 categories, teachers who lead and leaders who teach. And so when somebody's primary gift is a teaching gift, they're going to want to do that. But over time, what always is going to happen in the future, and it has happened in the past, is they will eventually say, hey, we need to go on our own, or will be forced economically to stay under an umbrella they don't like. Can I say denominations and a bunch of other things? And that usually will happen when Moses dies, because everybody's going to think they're Joshua. And I think all of you, as I say this, can see it over and over and over in places. But I think it's important to realize that's where it's heading. Like I said, it's a great model. It's the one the Lord has used forever. Multi-site, on the other hand, is video teaching, and I've never seen a video church spin off, because everybody's already left by the time they'd want to spin off. Now, I personal opinion, I'm not a big fan of video when you have one teacher that is teaching all the time. But way back when North Coast was just approaching 300 people, we moved to a teaching team. And that, that to me keeps it a little better off when there's a pastoral change or anything happens. But the reason I say multi-site is everybody thinks, oh man, it's a bummer. We're not going to be one church anymore when you go to two services, but you are, because you same message, same DNA being taught through it, same teacher. Then you go to different days. Oh, we're not one church. And oh, yes, we are. You go to different sites. If it's the same message, not same message by different people, but the same message by a team, you really are a multi-site church at that. And then you need to think about your future in terms of a larger church and how it's going to have its transition, whether it's a forced transition from a moral failure or a death, or a planned transition is going to have some of the same issues that go on. So the first thing is clarifying our definitions, because that will help us figure out where we're actually heading in the long run. And then we need, and by the way, I'm going to say why each of those, the advantage of each of those in a few moments, but then we need to clarify our motivation. Why are we doing this? And I see three motivations out there. Two of them are great, one of them not so good. The first one that's not so good is FOMO, the fear of missing out. Multi-site for a while became the sexy thing to do, to be able to say, hey, we have multiple campuses, even if they sucked, it didn't matter. It's like, we're able to say that. And so people were jumping on the bandwagon because everybody else was doing it, and they thought they had to do it. As a leading church in that movement, one of the things we try to do is train and help other churches do that. And we knew that our training network no longer needed to focus on it when the Outreach 100 started saying not only who's the pastor, what city, how many, but how many sites. It's like, okay. But the bad news is that people felt like they needed to have that. It was the sexy new thing. Another model of motivation, though, and this is the one you got to figure out where you're coming from, because again, they'll have slightly different trajectories. Both are good, is what I call pioneers. And the other is what I call settlers. So there's the bandwagon folks, the pioneers, and the settlers. The pioneer, first of all, every pastor has a map on the wall. It might not be physical map on the wall, but there's a map on the wall. And on that map are little pins with a little red and green little tops on them. And for one pastor, that map will have pins that show where they're going to go. And another pastor those pins will mark where they are. And the pioneers are the ones that have a map of where they want to go. And so they're doing studies to find out where a church is needed. And they're going somewhere that they don't have any real connections. That is high hanging fruit and hard to do. Where I see it successful is when it's led by a Macedonian call rather than idealism. I have not seen multi-site work really well, especially the video version of it, where people try to go where they have no connections, no particular branding, anything. I have seen it work where it's multi-congregational, because again, that's just another form of church planning that's been around forever. But if it's coming out of idealism, like, oh man, we should do this, without a track record of that success and the clarity of God's calling, I don't see it succeeding really well. Settlers are different. Settlers, their map on the wall is where they are. And I think that's where most successful multi-site churches and even multi-congregational churches go. And that's where you have boots on the ground already. You have a group of people driving a significant distance. Frankly, that's North Coast Church. All of our campuses have flown out of somebody coming to us. Even the ones that are around out of region, they come to us. There's already people there. The ones we've planted here, are because we have people driving more than 20 minutes, a large group of people, and say you got 600-700 people driving more than 20 minutes. Well, it's pretty clear that at least half of that or more, if we pull it off right, will do something in their own community. And so I think it's an important thing to figure out, because you'll have on your team, you'll have a pioneer and a settler. And you've got to get to the core leaders that God has anointed, whether that's a small group or it's an elder board or it's the lead pastor. Every church has kind of a vision head. And that small group or that person, it's to succeed at this, you're going to have to be faithful to their vision and motivation, and not have this group think where, well, you know, it's how do you speak against this? And so you end up doing things you don't really have a God-given passion for. And so I see what will succeed in the future is going to be exactly what succeeded in the past, the things that align actually with God's calling and God's giftedness, because that's where success has always been found. And things that align with idealism and a guilt gene have a long history of shipwrecked good ideas that didn't work out so well. So let's talk for a few minutes now about what hasn't changed and won't change as I look into the future in my mind. The first one is this: the 20-minute drive time barrier. Come and see evangelism and youth involvement disappear at about 20-minute drive time. And what you've got is you've got certain churches where people are actually coming for the teachers. And it is, we have a hard time admitting that. It just feels, you know, we don't like celebrity pastor. That's kind of an out thing today, even though there always have been and always will be celebrity pastors. And it's not their fault. God anointed them. You know, we'd be ripping on Moses today. Thinks he's a celebrity, you know, but the fact is, when you have the very large regional churches, what you usually have is a strong teacher or teaching team, and also some very strong ministries. But as they get larger and larger, one of the things we didn't note in the early days of mega churches was the drop-off in come and see evangelism and the drop-off in youth involvement for very obvious reasons. Those things, you know, you're 20 minutes away, it's an hour and 20-minute commute unless you bring your kid to junior high and stay and help. You go back and forth. So at North Coast, that's why we actually started Multisite, not to grow our church bigger, but to increase those two things. Because as a teaching church where the teaching ministry is one of the major draws, I came back because, as what we hear all the time, people were driving to get to us. And great, we were glad to have them. But again, these two important things weren't happening. So we said, we're going to bring ourselves to you. A mother-daughter church plant with live teaching would have been a great idea. And by the way, we've done those. But what happens is all the people go, thank you, because they think the daughter was the little version of the mother for about 6 months or a year. And then they drive back to where the mother is. So we said, no, we're going to beat it. And we have everything live. We don't even launch a campus without full children's, youth, great worship. But we go, we're going to put ourselves on the screen, and then you'll quit driving. So that's the first one. The second is geographical barriers. As we go forward, they're going to continue. Successful campuses are almost always regional. And there are a few outliers who have learned with celebrity churches or celebrity pastors who have learned to launch a campus way outside their regions. But even great churches like LCBC, I think of, that has done it so well, and Life Church, I mean, you don't find them in California, you don't find it in Washington, or if you do, it's quite small. By the way, that ministry is much more regional than we think. You know, out here in California, people are always surprised at all the big names on the East Coast and Southeast. None of our people know who they are. And you go to the Southeast and stuff, nobody knows who we are, and the larger churches. So it's much more regional than we think. Microsites are cross-regional and national, and I think they will continue to be. But microsites seldom become campuses. In the early days of this movement, a lot of us thought they would, but we just don't have evidence that that happens unless something really weird takes place. So we used to have this model of, oh, we'll do this to a microsite to a campus. And since we found it never worked, we threw that model away. A third thing that I think is going to continue in the future are the complexity barriers. A lot of things hit a ceiling because of complexity. You know, if there are two of us or two campuses or two services and we work together, we have two lines of communication. You go to 3, we have 6. You go to 4, we have 12. You go to 5, we have 20. It exponentially increases its complexity. And so I think going to the future, there's going to be a lot of churches with 1 or 2 campuses, fewer with 3 or 4, and very few with 4, 6, 9, 10, whatever it would be. And so I think the model is you got to figure out where your lid is in your ability to handle complexity, and not feel bad when you hit that lid of complexity skill set. And we got to not drive other churches to feel guilty with that. The fourth thing that won't change as I look forward is the need for what I would call a big L leader. In the early days of the multi-site movement and multi-campus movement, multi-campus didn't have it as bad, but especially multi-site and internet. What we all thought was we're bringing the mojo, the branding, the programming, everything. What we need is a gifted shepherd, the kind of person who creates relational health. And so we would do that. But here's what we've all discovered in I think it was 97, 98 when we first did our first video venue. So in these 20 plus years, here's what we've discovered. That if you give a shepherd 250 people, 3 years later, they'll give you 245 or 265. If you give a big L leader a gas station and 30 people, 3 years later, they'll give you 150. And the mark of a big L leader is they have a history of growing things. Their past is their prologue. And what we like to ask, well, by the way, we have a campus or 2 we go, we don't think it'll ever grow big. This is not the community we reach really well, but somehow we've reached some outliers there. And we tend to put a shepherd in those situations because we know it's probably not going to grow. Our style of church doesn't fit that community as well as others. But if we want it to grow, like right now, our next campus we're working at, we look at it and we go, I think it can be 1,500 to 2,500. And we only have a couple, 3 of our campuses that hit that kind of size. Well, we're looking for a big L leader. And the number one thing we're looking for is a history of growing what they touch. Not necessarily campuses. Little sidebar, we've always found our best campus pastors are successful youth pastors who work with parents, authority, contextualize. I mean, they've got everything they need. And usually if they're from another church, the other church still sees them as who they were 5 years ago and don't see who they've become. And so that's for free, which is, I guess this whole thing is. What has to change to succeed going forward? Let me give you a few of those things in the last few minutes we have. One, we've got to move from Macy's to Home Depot. Pre-COVID, most churches' websites and viewpoint of the internet was a tool to drive foot traffic. That's Macy's. We were Macy's with a website. I remember a Wall Street Journal article I read after the first little opening in COVID, and then we shut down with Delta. But it was about Macy's being quite pleased that the foot traffic had increased so much because that was their predictor of sales. Compare that to Home Depot, Target, Walmart, places that are totally agnostic about where the sale takes place. Home Depot, one time I want to go see it, other time I know exactly what it is, so ship it to me. Another time I want it real quickly, so I'll buy it online and go get it. And I just flow in and out, and they're happy with that. Many of us are still using the internet connection as a way to drive people back to church. We even use language like come back. At North Coast, we've never, since we've reopened, now remember, we're in a very blue state, but since we reopened, we've never used the phrase come back. We've always simply said we're happy to have a physical option because we don't want those who, for whatever reasons, aren't coming back to feel like we're mad at them or second class. Because frankly, the main people who feel like everybody's got to be in the room are those of us that are on stage. The speakers and the worship leaders, like, dude, I need you here. But for many of us, I know in my own life, when I'm traveling and I hear Chris Brown, who's currently our lead, I teach about 20 times a year. He's our lead pastor now. And when I listen to Chris Brown's messages, I get more of them when I'm listening online out of them than I do when I'm there. When I'm there, I'm wondering why this, gal's giving this guy a back rub, rent a room. And I'm wondering why in the world that, that light is flickering, etc. And I think a lot of people are that way. We need to look at the internet as a delivery system, not a campus going forward, be the second from campus to delivery system. And kind of running out of time, but just real quickly, a couple others is, I think the third was we need to move from the internet, which is such a part of multi-site, actually going forward. That's why I'm talking about it. We got to stop looking at it as a funnel in which we're trying to get people down the funnel to physically showing up. We take a plunger and push it down. We get more out the bottom, but a lot of crap out the top, to more like a sluice box where things are running through when we're trying to find out who's really interested. So real quickly at North Coast, we look at all of our online stuff now through three lenses: content, connected, and committed. Content are the people who just go to get some content, and we're honored that they're there for that, but we're not trying to turn them into North Coasters. As a teaching church, we get a lot of that, or somebody heard a sermon, they send it off to their friend, you need to watch that. And if we are trying to grab their name and address and everything when they're doing that, it's just like the websites you and I go to read an article and they want information, even if it's just a email, I'm gone. It's like, we're thrilled that maybe 50% are just there for content. A lot of us talk about how big our internet thing has gone, like it's our church, but people are doing 3, 4, 5 different churches they're listening to sermons on. So content. The other is connected. It's like the old school radio show where a tradesman or a stay-at-home mom listened every day to XYZ pastor. And they're connected because they listen a lot or watch a lot, and they send an occasional offering to keep you going. And then that's about 40%, we think. Then there's about 10% in which we're truly their church. They're gathering people, they're sending checks on a regular basis. We do a service day, they want to get the t-shirts as well. And here's the beauty of what we've done with our multi-site campuses, figuring out. We're focusing on the committed rather than trying to turn the content and connected into committed. It's like I go to a trade show and I get all of these business cards. I've got to triage them when I come back because some people just wanted a donut and others wanted to buy what I was selling. And if I treat everybody who wanted a donut and left a business card as a potential customer, I don't have enough time, energy to be able to do it. So that's a couple of things. I had a couple other things written down, but you'll never know. I'm already over my time. So Greg, let me throw it back to you. I hope this has kind of stirred the pot though and helped you.
Really, really good. Really, really good. Yeah, a couple questions. Let's see. This you probably already addressed this a little bit, but do you view digital and online community as a site in itself? No. Or do you have an online community space? When you do online, when you do your service, is there any kind of community interaction around that?
Zero. We never bought into the idea of a campus pastor with a chat room because at least in our physical places, when you're talking during the service, we ask you to leave. So what we're trying to do is find out, again, because now we're looking at the committed, not a few EGRs and other things that, we dominate time with. We're trying to find out who they are and see, do you want to get in a Zoom group, life group? Do you have enough? Can we help you with this group that's meeting in the clubhouse at your place, whatever it would be? So we don't do that. And we've also moved away from using the phrase campus because we don't want our regular people to feel like they're a visitor when they go online. And with all the club programs, the traveling and all that, again, people are going in and out like Home Depot. And when you talk about the internet campus, rather than, hey, North Coast, that's what we do. Hey, North Coast. We do put something different online. It's a studio shot because most people online are watching either on a television or if they're watching instead of just listening, or a computer. And facial expressions are so key to communication that we shoot a little table waist up, not quite as good a sermon, but much better tool right now. And then our venues get a live feed of us on stage. And our sermons, we feel, are much better to a live audience. But you got this little tiny person on the TV. It works great with a 16-foot screen, 14-foot screen, but not so good there.
Yeah, I tell the guys at our church, I said, it feels like I'm looking over the shoulder of somebody, into that, not really a part of the experience, sometimes a live stream.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it has everything to do with the size of the screen. I don't think most people have thought that through. And then your natural tendency is always to do your best performance. And I'm sarcastic, man. That's hard to do to a camera. Like, I don't know whether that went over or not. And Chris Brown's could be a comedian, and that with a crowd. But we would rather put not our best sermon that actually communicates better than make it all about us being the best we can be. We want the package at the end to be the best, and people will get more out of something on that screen where they can actually see.
Yeah, that's good. On the thing that you used, the produce thing, obviously that's a pre-recorded.
Yeah, I'm recording. I'm on this weekend. I'll record it at 1 o'clock our time today.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Saturday's a live feed to all our campuses. And then Sunday, we actually use Saturday again because Murphy lives in the live feed. So you just say today instead of tonight, and you don't tell a story about earlier in the day, and you're good. No one knows.
Yeah. Yeah. And with a lot of online stuff, you don't even have to make sure you're wearing the right shirt, right? Yeah. I remember back in the day, you would say, since you recorded you were showing the stream from Saturday night, if you were on campus on Sunday, you were wearing the same shirt you were on Saturday night. So you
still have to do that on the Vista campus with all its venues.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. Other questions? We got time for maybe one more. Let's see here. Yeah, this is a question. We're an African-American church that's launching campuses in areas that have a greater diversity of Black and white demographic. Visions to create a diverse team of leaders to reach a diverse demographic of the community. Plan to use a diverse teaching team to offer both Black and white preachers, as well as develop diverse worship teams. Both teams of preachers and worship teams will rotate through the campuses. Each campus will see the same preachers every month on a rotation. So the question is, what do you think about that template in terms of trying to create diversity around their campuses?
Are they live teaching or not would be such an important question. If they're video, I would say don't move people around. People need somebody to identify with. So a different pastor they see as their pastor every week would be confusing. I would say what you want is a lead pastor there. And if you're going to move your teachers, that's fine. That would be a bit like at North Coast, where whenever Chris Brown or I visit the church, we're their teachers, we're not their pastor. We don't suddenly get a big line because people need somebody who's there on the ground they can talk to. They see that knows their name. And so I would say you'd need to do that. And a diversity works very well until you try to have diversity of values. And then you almost get an artificial diversity that only works for the most mature of the mature. But when you talk about socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, and all of that, that model has been proven in many places. Where I think we go sideways is we want diversity just for diversity's sake, which is so politically correct today. But the reality is people make choices, people go, well, no, I want more of a teaching thing. No, I want something that's more emotive. No, I want something that's, and if you're not careful and you have diversity for diversity's sake, you get what we used to have in the worship wars long ago, far away in another galaxy. We called it a blended service, which I called a great way to make sure nobody's happy.
Good. That's good. That's genius. Good stuff. Hey, Larry, thank you so much. As always, man, I'm walking away with content connected and committed is one of my big takeaways from the things I've heard you say today. But I know there's a whole lot of other things that people have had the opportunity to experience as well. Thank you for being with us. Also want to say thank you to Jeff Kahler and to Bruce from College Park and Jeff Beachum. Again, thanks to Portable Church for sponsoring our time together. I hope that you've had a good experience. Thank you for everybody who's on the call for joining, or on the webinar today for joining us. You're going to get an email in the next little bit, and it promises it will take you 5 minutes. If you'll take 5 minutes to give us some feedback, we want to make sure to continue to improve this experience for you. All the completed surveys, we're going to enter into a chance to win a $25 Starbucks gift card. And then we're going to do our next Accelerator. We're going to do it in August. We're going to do it a little bit differently this time. We want to know what you need to know, what you want us to address. And so when you complete the survey, there's several options that are there. One around engagement. How do you measure and increase engagement? One around succession. How do you serve where you are while you plan for what's next? And then the third is closing the leadership gap, how to build a successful residency program, or perhaps it's something else. So there's an opportunity there for you to include your ideas as well. I wanted just to, as we close, just to again say thank you and note a couple of things that we would love to have the opportunity to have conversations with you about. Some of the work that we do at Ligon Group is in the work of cohorts. We'll be launching 3 new cohorts in the fall, one for senior pastors under the age of 40, one for executive pastors, and one what we're calling senior pastors finishing well. These are folks that are in 55 or so and beginning to think about succession, but not quite ready to pull the trigger, but want to begin to think about what's after their time in their lead role. We also do consulting. After 25 years of serving churches through my work with Leadership Network, and almost 20 years now working with Multisite churches, I had the privilege of having a front row seat with what God's doing and has done and is doing through churches. And I'd love to be able to come alongside you and help you walk through some of the questions that you have. I'd love to visit with you about that. Again, you can schedule a time in the email that you'll get. There'll be a time for a free consult you can schedule. And if you sign up for a call, I'm going to send you a copy of my ebook, Multisite Reimagined. So again, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been fun to see some old friends and see some new faces as well. And we're really excited you've been with us today. Thanks so much. Again, one last shout out to Larry, to Jeff, and to Bruce. Really appreciate your being with us today. Thanks.